Vanished on Easter. The family in Chicago in 1993. 15 years later, priest finds this. Father Michael Donovan pushed the rusty key into the lock of the storage room beneath St. Catherine's Church. The basement had been sealed since 1994, following water damage that required extensive renovation. Now in March 2008, the parish finally had funds to clear out the old furniture and documents stored below. The lock clicked open with difficulty. Donovan stepped into the musty space, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Water stains marked the concrete walls, and cardboard boxes sat in various stages of decay. The priest methodically worked through the debris, salvaging what could be saved and marking items for disposal. Behind a stack of old hymnals, Donovan discovered a leather satchel wedged between the wall and a broken pew. The bag felt heavy in his hands. Inside, he found a collection of items that made his breath catch. A child's pink Easter dress, still in its plastic wrapping with a Marshall Field's price tag, dated March 1993. A man's wallet containing a driver's license for Robert Allen Thompson, and a woman's purse holding identification for Linda Marie Thompson. Donovan recognized the names immediately. The Thompson family had vanished on Easter Sunday 1993, just blocks from this very church. 3 people, Robert, 34, Linda, 29, and their 3-year-old daughter Emma, had disappeared without explanation after attending morning service at St. Catherine's. The priest examined the wallet more carefully. It contained $47 in cash, credit cards, and a receipt from Tony's Hardware dated April 10, 1993, the day before the family disappeared. The purse held similar items: makeup, keys to a blue Honda Civic, and a grocery list written in careful handwriting. Father Donovan had served at St. Catherine's for only 2 years, but he knew the Thompson case remained Chicago's most puzzling missing persons investigation of the 1990s. The family had attended Easter service that morning, spoken with other parishioners, and then simply vanished. Their car was found 3 days later in a parking garage downtown, but no trace of the family emerged. The satchel contained one more item, a manila envelope with confidential stamped in red ink. Inside, Donovan found photographs and documents that made his hands tremble. The photos showed the Thompson family's house, their car, and detailed shots of their daily routines. Someone had been watching them. Donovan locked the storage room and carried the satchel to his office. He spread the contents across his desk and called the Chicago Police Department's non-emergency line. After explaining his discovery, he was transferred to Detective Sarah Martinez in Missing Persons. Father Donovan, Martinez said when she arrived 40 minutes later, "This case has been cold for 15 years. The original detective, James O'Brien, retired in 2005. He always believed something criminal happened to that family." Martinez photographed each item methodically. "This satchel wasn't here accidentally. Someone hid it deliberately. The question is whether it belonged to the family or to whoever took them." She held up one of the surveillance photographs. "Look at this angle. This was taken from across the street, probably from a car. Professional quality. Someone spent considerable time documenting their movements. Could this reopen the investigation?" Donovan asked. "Absolutely. Fresh evidence in a missing persons case never expires. I'm going to contact our cold case unit and pull the original files." Martinez sealed the evidence and prepared to leave. "Father, who had access to this storage room?" "It was locked after the flooding in 1994. The previous pastor, Father Gregory Walsh, handled the cleanup. He passed away in 2001. I'll need the names of anyone who might have had keys: maintenance staff, volunteers, church administrators." After Martinez left, Donovan sat alone in his office. The Thompson case had haunted the parish for years. Members still spoke about the family's sudden disappearance. Linda Thompson had volunteered in the church nursery. Robert had helped with maintenance projects. Little Emma had been a favorite in Sunday school. The priest recalled conversations with longtime parishioners who mentioned suspicious activity around the time of the disappearance. Several people remembered seeing unfamiliar cars in the neighborhood. Others talked about strangers asking questions about church members. Donovan pulled out the parish directory from 1993. He wanted to identify anyone who might remember details about that Easter Sunday. The directory listed the Thompson family's address as 2847 North Kedzie Avenue, just 6 blocks from the church. The phone rang. Martinez was calling back. "Father, I've been thinking about the timing. Your church flooded in 1994, just 1 year after the disappearance. Whoever hid that satchel chose a location they knew would be sealed off. This suggests someone with inside knowledge of the church's operations. You think someone from the parish was involved? I think someone wanted these items preserved but hidden. They picked a spot where the evidence would survive, but remain undiscovered unless someone specifically searched that room. Martinez promised to update Donovan as the investigation progressed. The priest spent the evening reviewing his predecessor's files, looking for any reference to the Thompson family or unusual incidents from 1993. He found Father Walsh's personal notes about parish members, including an entry about Robert Thompson, dated March 1993. Robert approached me about financial difficulties, mentioned pressure from unnamed sources, seemed frightened but reluctant to discuss details. The discovery changed everything. 15 years after the Thompson family vanished, evidence suggested their disappearance was not voluntary. Someone had planned their abduction carefully, documenting their routines and hiding proof of the surveillance in a location that would preserve it for years. Father Donovan locked the files in his desk drawer. Tomorrow he would contact every parish member from 1993 who remained in Chicago. Someone had to remember something that could help solve this case. Detective Sarah Martinez arrived at the Chicago Police Department's Records Division at 7:30 the next morning. The Thompson file occupied 3 thick folders containing witness statements, police reports, and evidence logs from the original investigation. She spread the documents across her desk and began reading Detective James O'Brien's initial report, dated April 14, 1993. Thompson family last seen leaving St. Catherine's Church, approximately 12:15 p.m. Easter Sunday, April 11, 1993. Multiple witnesses confirmed they attended full morning service. No indication of distress or unusual behavior. Family vehicle located April 14th in Grant Park underground garage. No signs of struggle in car or at residence. Martinez noted the thoroughness of O'Brien's work. He had interviewed 47 people, including family members, neighbors, co-workers, and fellow parishioners. The detective's notes revealed a family with no obvious enemies, but several unexplained changes in their behavior during the weeks before they disappeared. Robert Thompson had worked as a bookkeeper for Midwest Construction Services, a company specializing in city contracts. His supervisor, Donald Krantz, told police that Robert had become nervous and distracted in the weeks before Easter. He asked strange questions about our filing system and seemed worried about something he wouldn't discuss. Linda Thompson had been employed part-time at Children's Memorial Hospital in the records department. Her supervisor reported no unusual behavior, but co-workers mentioned that Linda had seemed tense during her final weeks at work. The most intriguing element in O'Brien's file was a series of interviews with Robert's brother, Michael Thompson, who lived in Milwaukee. Michael told police that Robert had called him twice in March 1993, once to ask about what happens when someone discovers financial irregularities at work, and again to inquire about how to protect family if someone makes threats. Martinez found the follow-up investigation into Midwest Construction Services particularly interesting. O'Brien had discovered that the company was under federal investigation for bid rigging on city contracts. Robert Thompson, as the bookkeeper, would have had access to financial records that could expose the scheme. The file contained a memo from FBI agent Patricia Hennessy, dated May 15, 1993. Robert Thompson had contacted our Chicago office in March 1993 regarding possible criminal activity at his workplace. He scheduled a meeting for April 15, 1993, but failed to appear. Attempts to contact the Thompson family have been unsuccessful. Martinez picked up her phone and dialed the FBI's Chicago office. After several transfers, she reached Agent Mark Sullivan, who had worked organized crime cases in the 1990s. Agent Sullivan, I'm reopening the Thompson family disappearance from 1993. Your office has records of contact with Robert Thompson before he vanished. I remember that case, Sullivan replied. Thompson was scared. He had discovered evidence of systematic fraud at his construction company. We arranged a meeting, but he never showed. When we learned the family had disappeared, we assumed they had run away. What kind of evidence did Thompson claim to have? Financial records showing inflated bids, false invoicing, and payments to city officials. His company was stealing millions from taxpayers. Thompson's evidence could have brought down some powerful people. Martinez requested copies of the FBI files. The federal investigation into Midwest Construction Services had continued after the Thompson disappearance. ultimately resulting in indictments of 12 people, including company executives and 3 city council members. She turned her attention to the original suspect list. O'Brien had identified several persons of interest, most notably Harold Brennan, the owner of Midwest Construction Services. Brennan had been questioned multiple times, but provided alibis for the days surrounding the disappearance. The detective's notes described Brennan as evasive and hostile during questioning, claimed minimal knowledge of Thompson's duties despite employing him for 6 years, refused to provide company financial records without subpoena. Martinez found O'Brien's phone number in the retired officer's directory. He answered on the second ring. "Detective O'Brien, this is Sarah Martinez with Missing Persons. I'm reopening the Thompson case. New evidence has surfaced." 15 years later? What kind of evidence? Martinez explained the discovery at St. Catherine's Church. O'Brien listened without interruption. "Those surveillance photos you described, I always suspected someone was watching that family. Several witnesses mentioned unfamiliar cars in their neighborhood during March 1993. Tell me about Harold Brennan." Dangerous man with connections to organized crime. His company was a front for money laundering and bid rigging. Thompson discovered the scheme and tried to do the right thing. I believe Brennan had them killed. O'Brien's conviction was evident in his voice. "I could never prove it. Brennan had alibis, his associates claimed ignorance, and the family's bodies were never found. But I knew Thompson didn't take his family and run away. He was too honest, too concerned about doing the right thing." What happened to Brennan? Federal investigation caught up with him eventually. He was convicted in 1996 of conspiracy and racketeering, served 8 years in federal prison, got out in 2004. Martinez made notes rapidly. "Is he still in Chicago?" "Far as I know. Runs a small contracting business on the south side. Keeps a low profile these days." After ending the call, Martinez pulled Harold Brennan's current records. He operated Brennan Brothers Construction from an address on South Halsted Street. The business had been incorporated in 2005, shortly after his release from prison. She decided to visit Brennan's workplace unannounced. The drive took 30 minutes through Chicago's industrial district. Brennan Brothers Construction occupied a small warehouse surrounded by a chain-link fence. Martinez parked across the street and observed the property. A few workers moved materials around the loading dock, but the operation appeared minimal compared to Brennan's previous empire. She approached the main office and found Harold Brennan sitting behind a metal desk covered with invoices and blueprints. He was 68 years old, gray-haired, and solidly built despite his age. "Mr. Brennan, I'm Detective Martinez with Chicago PD. I'd like to ask about your former employee, Robert Thompson." Brennan's expression hardened immediately. "Thompson? Haven't heard that name in 15 years. What's this about?" "New evidence has emerged in the family's disappearance. I told the police everything back then. Thompson worked for me, kept the books, seemed like a good employee. Then he and his family took off without notice. End of story." Martinez studied Brennan's reaction carefully. "You weren't surprised when they disappeared. People do strange things. Maybe they had debts, maybe they had problems, not my business." "The FBI believed Thompson was cooperating with their investigation into your company." Brennan stood up abruptly. "My company was investigated, prosecuted, and I served my time. That's ancient history. Unless you have a warrant, Detective, I think this conversation is over." Martinez left her business card on his desk. "If you remember anything else about the Thompson family, please call me." As she walked to her car, Martinez noticed Brennan watching from his office window. His reaction confirmed O'Brien's suspicions. Harold Brennan knew more about the Thompson disappearance than he admitted. The drive back to the station gave Martinez time to plan her next steps. She would interview surviving members of Midwest Construction Services and search for any connection between Brennan and the storage room at St. Catherine's Church. 15 years after the Thompson family vanished, the investigation was just beginning again. Detective Martinez spent the next morning tracking down former employees of Midwest Construction Services. The company's dissolution in 1996 had scattered the workforce, but personnel records provided current addresses for several key figures. Her first stop was the home of Janet Mills, who had served as Harold Brennan's secretary from 1987 to 1995. Mills, now 62, lived in a tidy bungalow in Portage Park. "I remember Robert Thompson well," Mills told Martinez as they sat in her living room. "Quiet man, very dedicated to his work. He stayed late many nights, especially during his final weeks with the company. Did you notice anything unusual about his behavior? In March 1993, Robert became increasingly nervous. He asked me strange questions about filing systems and document storage. Once I found him in the office on Saturday morning, going through old contracts. Mills paused, gathering her thoughts. Harold Brennan didn't like Robert's questions. I overheard heated conversations between them during Robert's last week of employment. What kind of conversations? Brennan told Robert to mind his own business and stick to basic bookkeeping. Robert responded that he couldn't ignore what he had discovered. Brennan threatened to fire him. Martinez took detailed notes. Did you ever see Robert remove any documents from the office? No, but I suspected he made copies of important files. The copy machine showed heavy usage during evenings when only Robert was in the building. Mills provided Martinez with names of other employees who might remember the period surrounding Thompson's disappearance. She also mentioned that Brennan had hired a private security company in early 1993 to protect company assets. Martinez's next interview was with Thomas Kowalski, a former construction foreman who had worked closely with Brennan on city projects. Kowalski agreed to meet at a diner near his current workplace. Brennan was connected to some dangerous people, Kowalski said over coffee. City officials, union bosses, organized crime figures. Cross Harold Brennan, and bad things happened. Did you know Robert Thompson? Good man, honest worker. Too honest for his own good. When Robert started asking questions about inflated invoices and kickback payments, everyone knew he was in trouble. Kowalski lowered his voice. Week before Thompson disappeared, Brennan brought in outside muscle. Two men I'd never seen before started hanging around the office. They weren't construction workers. Can you describe them? Both in their 30s, well-dressed, carried themselves like professionals, not the kind of men who worked with their hands. Brennan introduced them as security consultants. Martinez showed Kowalski copies of the surveillance photographs found in the church. He studied them carefully. This quality of photography suggests professional surveillance equipment. Those security consultants Brennan hired could have taken these pictures. After lunch, Martinez visited the offices of Associated Security Services, the company that had provided protection for Midwest Construction in 1993. The business was still operating under the same name from a downtown office building. She met with the current owner, David Chen, who had purchased the company in 2000. Chen provided access to archived contracts from the 1990s. We did work for Brennan's company, but the file is minimal, Chen explained, pulling out a thin folder. Short-term contract paid in cash, no detailed records of services provided. The contract was dated March 1, 1993, just 6 weeks before the Thompson family disappeared. It specified asset protection and surveillance services for a period of 8 weeks. Who were the operatives assigned to this contract? Martinez asked. Chen checked his records. Vincent Torino and Marcus Webb, both experienced surveillance specialists. Martinez requested current contact information for both men. Chen's records showed that Torino had died in a car accident in 1998, but Webb was still living in Chicago. She found Marcus Webb at his apartment in Lincoln Park that evening. Webb, now 51, worked as a freelance security consultant after leaving Associated Security in 2002. I remember the Brennan contract, Webb admitted after Martinez showed her badge. Strange job from the beginning. We were told to watch a bookkeeper and his family, document their movements but never interfere. Did you take photographs of the Thompson family? Webb nodded reluctantly. Professional surveillance requires documentation. We followed standard procedures. Martinez described the photos found at St. Catherine's Church. Are these your photographs? Could be. We took hundreds of pictures over 6 weeks. Vincent Torino handled most of the photography while I managed the surveillance logistics. What happened to your files from this case? Company policy required us to turn over all materials to the client when the contract ended. Brennan took everything. Webb seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the questions. Detective, we were hired to watch, not to harm. Whatever happened to that family occurred after our surveillance ended. When did the surveillance end? April 9, 1993, 2 days before they disappeared. Martinez felt a chill. The timeline was too convenient. Why did the surveillance end? Brennan called and cancelled the contract, said he no longer needed our services. The detective spent the rest of the evening reviewing the evidence. Brennan had hired professional surveillance on the Thompson family, documented their routines for 6 weeks, then cancelled the surveillance just 2 days before they vanished. The pattern suggested careful planning and execution. She called Detective O'Brien at home to share her discoveries. "Sarah, you're building the case I never could," O'Brien said. "Brennan orchestrated the whole thing. Professional surveillance, inside knowledge of the family's routines, and the power to make people disappear. But why hide the evidence at the church? Someone wanted insurance. Maybe Vincent Torino kept copies of the surveillance materials as protection. When he died in 1998, someone else had access to his files." Martinez made a note to investigate Torino's death more closely. A car accident seemed convenient for someone who possessed evidence of murder. She also planned to research the connection between Brennan and St. Catherine's Church. Someone with access to the storage room had hidden the satchel. That person either worked for Brennan or had discovered the truth about the Thompson family's fate. The case was becoming clearer, but the most important questions remained unanswered. Where were Robert, Linda, and Emma Thompson? And who had preserved the evidence that could finally bring their killer to justice? Martinez worked until midnight, organizing the growing file. Tomorrow she would investigate Vincent Torino's death and search for any connection between Harold Brennan and St. Catherine's Church. 15 years after the crime, the truth was finally emerging. Detective Martinez began Thursday morning with a visit to the Cook County Medical Examiner's office. Vincent Torino's autopsy file from 1998 provided details about his death that raised immediate questions. Dr. Patricia Huang, the pathologist who had performed the autopsy, reviewed the case with Martinez. "Single car accident on Lakeshore Drive at 3 in the morning," Dr. Huang explained. "Torino's car struck a concrete barrier at high speed. No skid marks, no evidence of braking. Was alcohol or drug use suspected? Blood tests were negative. Torino appeared to be in good health, no medical conditions that would explain sudden incapacitation." Martinez studied the photographs from the accident scene. "This looks like someone might have forced him off the road." "That's possible, but there was no evidence of another vehicle." The case was closed as accidental death. Dr. Huang pulled out additional files. "However, I did note something unusual. Torino's apartment was burglarized 3 days after his death. Police found the place ransacked, but his widow couldn't identify anything missing." Martinez added Torino's burglary to her growing list of suspicious circumstances. Someone had searched his apartment, possibly looking for surveillance materials from the Thompson case. Her next stop was the Chicago Public Library's newspaper archives. She searched for any connection between Harold Brennan and St. Catherine's Church during the early 1990s. After 2 hours of research, Martinez found a significant link. The Tribune's business section from February 1993 mentioned that Midwest Construction Services had been awarded a contract to repair storm damage at several Catholic churches, including St. Catherine's. The article stated, "Brennan's company will replace damaged roofing and repair water damage at St. Catherine's Church in North Park. Work is scheduled to begin in March 1993. Martinez immediately called Father Donovan. "Father, I need to verify something. Did Midwest Construction Services do repair work at your church in 1993? "Let me check the parish records," Donovan replied. After a few minutes, he returned to the phone. "Yes, they repaired roof damage and fixed flooding in the basement during March and April 1993. The work was completed just before Easter." "Who supervised the construction work?" Father Walsh's notes indicate that Harold Brennan personally oversaw the basement repairs. He had access to all areas of the church for several weeks. Martinez felt the pieces falling into place. Brennan had perfect access to the storage room during the period when the Thompson family was under surveillance. He could have hidden the evidence at any point during the construction project. She drove immediately to St. Catherine's Church. Father Donovan met her in the basement storage room where the satchel had been discovered. "Show me exactly where you found the evidence," Martinez requested. Donovan pointed to the space behind the old hymnals. The satchel was wedged between the wall and this broken pew. Martinez examined the area carefully. The pew appeared to have been moved recently, creating a perfect hiding place that wouldn't be disturbed during normal storage activities. "Father, I need to interview anyone who might have worked with Brennan's construction crew in 1993. Donovan checked his predecessor's files. "Mrs. Eleanor Kowalski coordinated with the construction workers. She's still a parishioner, lives about 10 blocks from here." Eleanor Kowalski, 83 years old, met Martinez at her apartment that afternoon. Despite her age, she had clear memories of the church renovation project. "Harold Brennan was very particular about the basement work," Mrs. Kowalski recalled. "He insisted on doing certain repairs personally. Wouldn't let his regular crew into some areas. Did you see him in the storage room? Several times. He said he was checking for structural damage, but I thought it was strange. The storage room hadn't been affected by the roof leak. Mrs. Kowalski provided another crucial detail. Brennan brought materials to the church in a leather satchel. Said it contained blueprints and inspection documents. I remember thinking it was unusual for a construction worker to carry such an expensive bag. Martinez showed Mrs. Kowalski photographs of the satchel found by Father Donovan. She identified it immediately as the bag Brennan had carried during the renovation project. That's definitely the same satchel. I remember the brass buckles and the worn leather handles. The evidence was overwhelming. Brennan had used the church renovation project as cover to hide surveillance materials from the Thompson case. The satchel containing the photographs and personal belongings had been placed in the storage room during April 1993, shortly after the family's disappearance. Martinez returned to police headquarters and called Harold Brennan's office. "Mr. Brennan, I need to schedule a formal interview regarding the Thompson investigation. I told you everything yesterday, Detective. I have nothing more to say. New evidence suggests you were involved in surveillance of the Thompson family prior to their disappearance." The line went silent for several seconds. "I want my lawyer present for any further questioning." "That's your right, Mr. Brennan, but understand that this investigation is now focused on homicide charges." Martinez arranged for surveillance of Brennan's business and residence. If he attempted to flee or destroy evidence, she would be ready. She spent the evening reviewing the case files with Detective O'Brien, who had agreed to assist with the reopened investigation. Harold Brennan orchestrated this whole thing, O'Brien concluded. Professional surveillance, inside access to hide evidence, and the resources to make a family disappear without a trace. But why preserve the evidence? Why not destroy the photographs and personal items? O'Brien considered the question. Insurance policy? Brennan kept evidence of his surveillance operation in case he needed leverage against his associates. The church was perfect, hidden but preserved. Martinez agreed with O'Brien's assessment. Brennan never expected the evidence to be discovered. He chose a location that would keep the materials safe but inaccessible. What's your next move? Interview Brennan with his attorney present. Confront him with the evidence and see if he's willing to negotiate. After 15 years, he might prefer to make a deal rather than face murder charges. O'Brien warned Martinez to be careful. Brennan's dangerous, and he still has connections. Make sure you have backup when you question him. Martinez agreed to take precautions. The case was reaching a critical stage where the suspect might become desperate. She scheduled the interview for Friday morning at police headquarters. Brennan's attorney, Thomas Mitchell, would be present. Martinez planned to present all the evidence systematically, building an overwhelming case for Brennan's involvement in the Thompson family's disappearance. The 15-year mystery was finally approaching resolution. Harold Brennan would face justice for his crimes, and the Thompson family would receive the closure they deserved. Martinez worked late into the night, preparing questions and organizing evidence for the crucial interview that could solve one of Chicago's most puzzling missing persons cases. Friday morning's interview took place in the main conference room at Area North headquarters. Harold Brennan arrived with his attorney, Thomas Mitchell, a sharp-dressed criminal defense lawyer with a reputation for representing organized crime figures. Martinez had arranged the evidence methodically across the conference table: surveillance photographs, the Thompson family's personal items, construction contracts, and witness statements. Detective O'Brien sat beside her as consulting investigator. "Mr. Brennan," Martinez began, "we've discovered evidence linking you directly to surveillance of the Thompson family before their disappearance." Mitchell immediately interjected. "My client maintains his previous statements. He employed Robert Thompson as a bookkeeper and had no involvement in the family's disappearance." Martinez placed the surveillance photographs in front of Brennan. These professional quality images were taken by operatives you hired through Associated Security Services. Marcus Webb has confirmed your contract with his company. Brennan studied the photographs without visible emotion. "I hired security services to protect company assets during a federal investigation. Standard business practice. The contract specifically covered surveillance of the Thompson family for 6 weeks, ending 2 days before they disappeared. Coincidence?" O'Brien leaned forward. "Harold, we know Robert Thompson was providing evidence to the FBI about your bid-rigging scheme. He was scheduled to meet with federal agents on April 15, 1993. Mitchell placed a restraining hand on his client's arm, but Brennan ignored the warning. Thompson was a disloyal employee who tried to destroy my business. He was feeding information to federal prosecutors and lying about our operations. So you had him killed? I never said that. Martinez produced the leather satchel. This bag belonged to you. Eleanor Kowalski from St. Catherine's Church identified it as the satchel you carried during renovation work at the church in March 1993. Brennan's composure cracked slightly. Lots of people carry similar bags. Your construction company had complete access to the church basement during the renovation project. You personally supervised repairs in the storage room where this evidence was hidden. Mitchell demanded a recess to confer with his client. After 15 minutes, they returned to the conference room. Mr. Brennan is willing to acknowledge that he hired surveillance on the Thompson family, Mitchell announced. However, the surveillance was purely defensive, designed to monitor potential threats to company security. Martinez pressed forward. The surveillance ended on April 9th. The Thompson family disappeared on April 11th. 2 days later, their car was found abandoned in Grant Park. My client had no involvement in their disappearance. O'Brien placed Vincent Torino's accident report on the table. Your surveillance operative died in a suspicious car accident in 1998. 3 days later, his apartment was burglarized. Brennan remained silent, but Martinez noticed perspiration on his forehead. We believe Torino kept copies of surveillance materials as insurance. When he died, someone searched his apartment for those files. Mitchell called for another recess. This time, the private conference lasted 30 minutes. When they returned, Mitchell's approach had changed completely. Detective Martinez, my client is prepared to discuss a potential cooperation agreement with the prosecutor's office. Martinez exchanged glances with O'Brien. What kind of cooperation? Information about other criminal activities from the 1990s in exchange for consideration regarding charges in the Thompson case. We're not interested in deals unless Mr. Brennan provides information about what happened to Robert, Linda, and Emma Thompson. Brennan finally spoke. I never intended for anyone to get hurt. The surveillance was supposed to pressure Thompson into keeping quiet. Mitchell tried to silence his client, but Brennan continued. Thompson was going to destroy everything. My business, my associates, dozens of families who depended on our operations. I had to protect what we'd built. So you had them killed. I hired people to convince Thompson to reconsider his cooperation with federal agents. The situation got out of hand. Martinez leaned forward. Who did you hire? Professional contractors from out of state. They were supposed to threaten the family, make them understand the consequences of cooperation. What went wrong? Brennan hesitated, then looked directly at Martinez. Thompson fought back. He tried to protect his family. The contractors decided elimination was cleaner than intimidation. Mitchell was frantically taking notes, trying to minimize his client's admissions. Where are the bodies? O'Brien demanded. I don't know specific details. The contractors handled disposal. Martinez felt a mixture of satisfaction and revulsion. After 15 years, Harold Brennan was finally confessing to his role in the Thompson family murders. We need names of the people you hired. Anthony Castellano and Frank Moratini, both from Detroit. Castellano died in prison in 2003. Moratini might still be alive. O'Brien wrote down the names. Both were known associates of Detroit organized crime families with extensive criminal records. How did you pay them? Cash payments through intermediaries, $50,000 total. Martinez continued the questioning for 2 more hours, extracting details about the murder conspiracy. Brennan admitted to providing the killers with surveillance materials, personal information about the Thompson family, and their daily routines. The interview ended when Mitchell insisted his client needed medical attention. Brennan appeared exhausted and was complaining of chest pains. As they left the conference room, Mitchell approached Martinez privately. Detective, my client is willing to provide complete cooperation in exchange for second-degree murder charges instead of first-degree. That decision belongs to the prosecutor's office. We'll present your client's confession and let the state's attorney determine appropriate charges. After Brennan and his attorney departed, Martinez and O'Brien reviewed the confession. 15 years later, we finally have the truth, O'Brien said. Partial truth. We still need to locate Frank Moratini and find out what happened to the bodies. Martinez contacted the Detroit Police Department and requested assistance in locating Moratini. She also began preparing arrest warrants for Harold Brennan on charges of conspiracy to commit murder. The Thompson case had taken a dramatic turn. Harold Brennan's confession provided the breakthrough investigators had sought for 15 years, but significant work remained to build a complete case and locate the victim's remains. Martinez worked late into the evening, preparing reports for the prosecutor's office and coordinating with federal authorities who might have information about Anthony Castellano and Frank Moratini. Justice for the Thompson family was finally within reach, but the most difficult challenges still lay ahead. Saturday morning brought urgent news from Detroit. Detective Raymond Park called Martinez with information about Frank Moratini. "We found your man," Park reported. Frank Moratini, 61 years old, currently serving time at the Federal Correctional Institution in Milan, Michigan. Conviction for racketeering and money laundering in 2005. Martinez felt a surge of excitement. Moratini was alive and in custody, making him accessible for questioning about the Thompson murders. What's his release date? December 2009. Still has 14 months left on his sentence. Can you arrange for us to interview him? Already in progress. Federal marshals will transport him to Chicago Monday morning for questioning. Martinez spent the weekend preparing for the critical interview. She reviewed files on Moratini's criminal history, studying his previous arrests and known associates. The Detroit organized crime figure had been involved in multiple murders during the 1990s, but had never been convicted of homicide. She also researched Anthony Castellano, Moratini's deceased partner. Castellano had died in federal prison in 2003 while serving a life sentence for murder. His FBI file contained references to several unsolved killings, including the 1994 disappearance of a witness in a federal racketeering case. Detective O'Brien joined Martinez at headquarters Sunday evening to review their strategy. "Moratini's a career criminal," O'Brien noted. "He won't cooperate without significant incentives. The federal prosecutor in Detroit might be willing to negotiate. Moratini's cooperation in solving a triple homicide could justify sentence reduction." Martinez had contacted Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh in Detroit, who expressed interest in using the Thompson case to pressure Moratini for information about other unsolved crimes. "The key is convincing Moratini that we have enough evidence to convict him with or without his cooperation," Martinez explained. "Brennan's confession establishes the conspiracy. We need Moratini to provide details about the actual murders." Monday morning's interview took place in a secure conference room at the federal building. Frank Moratini arrived in shackles, accompanied by 2 federal marshals. His attorney, David Russo, had flown in from Detroit. Moratini was a large man with graying hair and cold eyes that revealed nothing. He sat silently while Martinez explained the charges he faced in connection with the Thompson family murders. "Mr. Moratini, Harold Brennan has confessed to hiring you and Anthony Castellano to eliminate the Thompson family in April 1993. Russo immediately objected. "My client denies any involvement in the alleged crimes." Martinez placed Brennan's signed confession on the table. "Your client was paid $50,000 to murder Robert Linder and Emma Thompson. We have detailed testimony about the conspiracy." Moratini read Brennan's statement carefully, then looked up at Martinez. "Harold Brennan is a liar trying to save himself. I never worked for him. Phone records show multiple calls between Brennan's office and your Detroit number during March and April 1993. "Proves nothing." O'Brien joined the questioning. "Frank, we've connected you and Castellano to at least 6 murders during the 1990s. The Thompson case is just the beginning. You got nothing but an old man's lies." Martinez tried a different approach. "Where are the bodies, Frank? 3 people deserve a proper burial. Their families need closure." "I don't know what you're talking about." The interview continued for 3 hours without significant progress. Moratini maintained his denials, despite overwhelming evidence of his involvement in the conspiracy. During a break, Martinez conferred with Russo privately. "Counselor, your client is facing life without parole on federal murder charges. The evidence is overwhelming. What kind of deal are you offering?" "Full cooperation regarding the Thompson murders and any other information about Harold Brennan's criminal activities. In exchange, we recommend a plea to second-degree murder with possibility of parole after 20 years. Russo considered the offer. "I need to discuss this with my client." After an hour, Russo requested a resumption of the interview. "Mr. Moratini is prepared to provide limited information about his activities in 1993. Martinez turned on the recording equipment. "Mr. Moratini, Do you acknowledge working with Anthony Castellano on behalf of Harold Brennan in April 1993? Moratini nodded reluctantly. Yeah, Brennan hired us for a job in Chicago. What kind of job? He wanted us to convince a bookkeeper to stop cooperating with federal investigators. Robert Thompson? That's right. Thompson was feeding information to the FBI about Brennan's construction scams. Martinez pressed for details. What were you supposed to do to Thompson? Scare him, make him understand the consequences of betraying business associates. Did you kill Robert Thompson? Moratini hesitated, then looked at his attorney. The situation got complicated. Explain what happened. We approached Thompson at his house on April 11th, told him to back off from the federal investigation. He refused and threatened to call police. Then what happened? Castellano lost his temper. He hit Thompson with a wrench. The guy went down hard. Martinez felt her pulse quickening. Was Robert Thompson killed in his own house? Yeah, blood everywhere. We couldn't leave him there. What about Linda and Emma Thompson? Moratini's expression darkened. They came home while we were dealing with Robert's body. Castellano decided we couldn't leave witnesses. He killed a woman and a 3-year-old child. Castellano was a psychopath. Once he started killing, he couldn't stop. O'Brien interrupted. Where are the bodies? Castellano had connections with waste disposal companies. The bodies were incinerated at an industrial facility in Gary, Indiana. Martinez struggled to contain her emotions. The Thompson family had been murdered in their own home, then their remains destroyed to hide the evidence. Which facility in Gary? Midwest Industrial Waste. Company's been closed since 1997. Who else was involved in the disposal? The facility manager, a guy named Pete Kowalski. Castellano paid him $20,000 to handle the job. Martinez made notes rapidly. She would need to investigate the closed waste facility and locate Pete Kowalski. What happened to the Thompson house after the murders? Brennan had a cleanup crew remove all traces of blood and evidence. Professional job made it look like the family had just left voluntarily. The interview continued for 2 more hours as Moratini provided detailed information about the conspiracy. His confession corroborated Brennan's testimony and filled in crucial gaps about how the murders were executed. By evening, Martinez had obtained a complete picture of the Thompson family's final hours. The case that had puzzled investigators for 15 years was finally solved. Harold Brennan would face murder charges. Frank Moratini would likely spend the rest of his life in prison. But most importantly, the truth about Robert, Linda, and Emma Thompson's fate had been revealed. Martinez prepared to contact the victims' surviving family members. After 15 years of uncertainty, they would finally know what had happened to their loved ones. Tuesday morning brought disturbing news. Harold Brennan had failed to appear for a scheduled meeting with his attorney. When police arrived at his South Halstead business, they found the office empty, and Brennan's employees claiming no knowledge of his whereabouts. Martinez immediately issued an APB for Brennan and contacted the FBI's Fugitive Task Force. A man who had orchestrated multiple murders would not hesitate to flee the jurisdiction rather than face life imprisonment. Detective O'Brien joined the search efforts, focusing on Brennan's known associates and possible escape routes. Financial records showed that Brennan had withdrawn $40,000 from various bank accounts over the past week. He's been planning this since our first interview, O'Brien observed. Probably has false identification and transportation arranged. Martinez coordinated with airport security and border patrol agents. Brennan's photograph was distributed to all major transportation hubs in the Midwest. At noon, a significant lead emerged. Thomas Mitchell, Brennan's attorney, called Martinez with urgent information. Detective, I think I know where Harold might have gone. He mentioned having a cabin in Wisconsin near Lake Geneva, property owned under his brother's name. Mitchell provided the address, 1247 Pine Ridge Road, Williams Bay, Wisconsin. The property was registered to Robert Brennan, Harold's deceased brother. Martinez assembled a tactical team that included Detective O'Brien and 3 uniformed officers. The drive to Williams Bay would take 90 minutes through rural Wisconsin. During the journey, Martinez received additional intelligence from the FBI. Financial records showed that Harold Brennan had purchased camping supplies and firearms from sporting goods stores in suburban Chicago during the past week. He's armed and preparing for a siege, O'Brien warned. This won't be a simple arrest. The cabin was located on a wooded property overlooking Lake Geneva. Martinez positioned her team strategically around the building, maintaining visual contact while avoiding detection. Through binoculars, She observed smoke rising from the cabin's chimney and movement behind curtained windows. A blue Ford pickup truck was parked in the driveway. Martinez used a megaphone to announce their presence. "Harold Brennan, this is Chicago Police. The building is surrounded. Come out with your hands visible." The response was immediate gunfire from the cabin's front windows. Martinez and her team took cover behind trees and police vehicles. "Harold, there's no escape. Surrender peacefully, and we can work out an arrangement." More gunfire erupted from multiple windows. Brennan had obviously prepared defensive positions throughout the cabin. Martinez called for backup from the Wisconsin State Police and negotiators trained in hostage situations. The standoff could continue for hours if Brennan chose to resist arrest. During a lull in the shooting, Martinez's cell phone rang. The caller ID showed Harold Brennan's number. "Detective Martinez, you've destroyed everything I worked for. Harold, it doesn't have to end this way. Surrender now and we can discuss plea arrangements. There's no deal that gives me my life back. I'm 70 years old. I won't die in prison." Martinez tried to keep him talking while tactical officers moved into better positions. "Think about your family, Harold. Your brother wouldn't want this to be your legacy. My brother died 10 years ago. I got nothing left to lose. You could help other families find closure. There might be more victims who deserve justice." Brennan was silent for several seconds. "You want the truth about other jobs? I'll tell you about Detroit, Kansas City, Philadelphia. Castellano and I worked for people all over the Midwest." Martinez signaled O'Brien to record the conversation. "Tell me about the other murders." "Insurance executive in Detroit, 1994. Fed information about Tony Castellano's money laundering. We made him disappear." "What was his name?" "Richard Walsh. Family thinks he ran away with a girlfriend. Truth is, he's buried in a concrete foundation on the east side." Brennan continued confessing to additional murders while Martinez's team closed in on the cabin. His voice revealed exhaustion and resignation. "Kansas City banker, 1996. Woman named Sandra Mills. She discovered irregularities in loans to organized crime figures. Castellano strangled her in her own garage." "Where's the body?" "Bottom of a quarry outside Kansas City. Car went in with her." The confessions continued for 30 minutes as Brennan described a decade of murders committed on behalf of organized crime figures throughout the Midwest. "Harold, these families deserve to know the truth. Come out and help us recover the remains." "Too late for that, detective. I'm not going back to Chicago." The line went dead. Martinez immediately called the cabin's landline, but there was no answer. Tactical officers reported seeing movement through the rear windows. Brennan appeared to be preparing for a final confrontation. "He's pouring gasoline throughout the cabin," one officer reported via radio. "Looks like he's planning to burn the place down." Martinez made the decision to storm the building before Brennan could destroy evidence or harm himself. The tactical team approached from multiple directions while she provided covering fire. The front door was unlocked. Officers found Brennan in the main room, surrounded by gasoline cans and holding a cigarette lighter. "Stay back," he shouted. "I'll burn everything, including evidence about other murders." O'Brien entered from the rear of the cabin, his weapon drawn. "Harold, there's no point in destroying evidence. We already have your confessions recorded. You don't have locations of all the bodies. Families will never find their relatives without my cooperation." Martinez approached slowly, her hands visible. "Harold, help these families. Tell us where the other victims are buried." Brennan looked directly at her. "Richard Walsh is under the foundation of a warehouse at 1847 East 8 Mile Road in Detroit. Sandra Mills is in Morrison Quarry, 15 miles south of Kansas City. Are there others?" "Philadelphia contractor named Michael Torres, 1997. He's in a landfill outside Camden, New Jersey." Martinez continued recording as Brennan provided specific locations for multiple murder victims. His cooperation would help solve cold cases across the Midwest. "Harold, put down the lighter and surrender. You're doing the right thing by helping these families." Brennan hesitated, then dropped the lighter and raised his hands. Officers moved quickly to restrain him and secure the scene. The cabin contained extensive evidence of Brennan's criminal activities, including financial records, photographs, and documents related to murders in multiple states. During the drive back to Chicago, Brennan continued providing information about his criminal activities. Martinez realized they had captured not just the Thompson family's killer, but a serial murderer, responsible for crimes spanning 2 decades. The pursuit had ended successfully, but the investigation would continue as authorities in multiple states worked to recover victims' remains and bring closure to families who had waited years for answers about their missing relatives. Harold Brennan would face justice for his crimes, and his confession would help solve dozens of cold cases throughout the Midwest. Harold Brennan was transported back to Chicago Wednesday evening under heavy security. His capture at the Wisconsin cabin had generated significant media attention, and authorities were taking no chances with his safety during the return journey. Martinez met the convoy at Area North headquarters, where Brennan would be processed and formally charged with the Thompson family murders. His attorney, Thomas Mitchell, was waiting in the booking area. "Mr. Mitchell, your client has been extremely cooperative," Martinez informed the lawyer. "His confessions will help solve multiple cold cases across the Midwest." Detective Martinez, Harold wants to continue providing information. He understands that cooperation is his only path to avoiding the death penalty. Martinez nodded. "We'll schedule formal interviews once he's been processed and had medical evaluation." Brennan appeared exhausted but lucid as he was led through the booking procedures. The 70-year-old man looked fragile compared to the imposing figure who had terrorized witnesses 15 years earlier. Thursday morning's interrogation took place in the same conference room where Brennan had first been questioned. This time, he was accompanied by Mitchell and a court reporter who would document his complete confession. "Mr. Brennan," Martinez began, "you've indicated willingness to provide full details about the Thompson family murders and related crimes. Do you understand that these statements will be used in court proceedings?" "I understand completely. I want to tell the truth about everything." Mitchell interjected, "My client's cooperation is contingent upon the state's attorney's office agreeing to life imprisonment without possibility of parole instead of capital punishment. That decision will be made after we review the complete scope of his confession." Martinez turned on recording equipment and began systematic questioning about the Thompson case. "Harold, describe exactly what happened on April 11, 1993 at the Thompson residence." Brennan took a deep breath before responding. "I had been monitoring Robert Thompson for weeks through professional surveillance. He was scheduled to meet with FBI agents on April 15th to provide evidence about my company's bid rigging operations." "What evidence did Thompson possess?" "Financial records showing systematic inflation of city contracts, kickback payments to municipal officials, and money laundering through various construction projects. Thompson's testimony would have destroyed my business and sent dozens of people to prison." Martinez made notes while Brennan continued his confession. "I hired Anthony Castellano and Frank Moratini to pressure Thompson into withdrawing his cooperation with federal investigators. They were supposed to threaten him, make him understand the consequences of betraying business associates." "When did you realize the situation had escalated beyond threats?" "Castellano called me around 3 o'clock on April 11th. He said Thompson had been killed during the confrontation and that the family had witnessed the murder." Brennan's voice remained steady as he described the details. "Castellano was panicking. He said Thompson's wife and daughter had come home unexpectedly and seen Robert's body." "What did you tell Castellano to do?" "I told him to leave immediately and let me handle the cleanup." But Castellano had already decided that Linda and Emma Thompson couldn't be allowed to live. Martinez felt revulsion at Brennan's clinical description of the child's murder. "You knew Castellano was going to kill a 3-year-old girl?" "I tried to stop him, but Castellano was beyond rational thought. He strangled Linda Thompson with a telephone cord and suffocated little Emma with a plastic bag." The confession continued for 2 hours as Brennan provided detailed information about the murders and subsequent cover-up. He described hiring a professional cleaning crew to remove all traces of blood from the Thompson house. "The cleanup took 6 hours, Brennan explained. "Every surface was scrubbed, carpeting was replaced, and furniture was rearranged to eliminate evidence of struggle." "How did you dispose of the bodies?" Castellano had connections with Midwest Industrial Waste in Gary, Indiana. The facility manager, Pete Kowalski, was paid $20,000 to incinerate the remains without creating records. Martinez interrupted the questioning to call authorities in Indiana. The closed waste facility would need to be investigated for any remaining evidence. "Harold, why did you hide the surveillance materials at St. Catherine's Church?" "Insurance policy. I kept documentation of the surveillance operation in case I needed leverage against Castellano and Moratini. The church renovation provided perfect cover to hide the evidence. You never intended for the materials to be discovered. The storage room was flooded and sealed. I expected the evidence to remain hidden indefinitely. Brennan's confession expanded to include details about other murders committed by his organization during the 1990s. Each case followed a similar pattern. Potential witnesses or whistleblowers were eliminated to protect criminal enterprises. Richard Walsh in Detroit was going to expose Tony Castellano's money laundering operation. Sandra Mills in Kansas City discovered irregularities in loans to organized crime figures. Michael Torres in Philadelphia was cooperating with federal investigators about construction fraud. Martinez documented each confession carefully. Brennan's testimony would help solve cold cases in multiple jurisdictions and bring closure to families who had waited years for answers. Harold, estimate how many people your organization killed during the 1990s. Directly or indirectly, at least 12 murders that I know about, possibly more that Castellano handled independently. The scope of the criminal enterprise was staggering. Brennan had operated a murder-for-hire organization that eliminated threats to organized crime throughout the Midwest. Why are you confessing to these crimes now? Brennan was silent for several minutes before responding. I'm 70 years old with terminal lung cancer. The doctors give me less than 2 years to live. These families deserve to know the truth about their relatives. Martinez felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Justice would finally be served, but it had taken 15 years and dozens of victims to reach this point. Harold, is there anything else we should know about your criminal activities? Check the files in my cabin. I kept records of every job, every payment, every crime committed by my organization. Use that information to help other families find closure. The interrogation concluded after 6 hours of detailed confessions. Harold Brennan had provided law enforcement with information that would solve cold cases across multiple states and help recover remains of numerous murder victims. Mitchell negotiated a plea agreement that avoided capital punishment in exchange for Brennan's complete cooperation with ongoing investigations. The former construction company owner would spend the rest of his life in federal prison. Martinez spent the afternoon coordinating with law enforcement agencies in Detroit, Kansas City, and Philadelphia. Brennan's confessions would trigger extensive investigations to locate victims' remains and close cold cases. The Thompson family murders had been solved, but Harold Brennan's crimes extended far beyond Chicago. His confession would help bring justice to victims and families across the Midwest who had waited years for answers about their missing relatives. The aftermath of Harold Brennan's confession created a flurry of investigative activity across multiple states. Detective Martinez coordinated with federal authorities to establish a task force dedicated to locating victims and recovering evidence from Brennan's extensive criminal enterprise. Friday morning brought the first breakthrough from Detroit. FBI agents excavating the warehouse foundation at 1847 East 8 Mile Road discovered skeletal remains that matched the description of Richard Walsh, the insurance executive who had disappeared in 1994. Special Agent Patricia Sullivan called Martinez with the details. Dental records confirm it's Walsh. The remains were encased in concrete exactly as Brennan described. We're treating this as a homicide scene and collecting additional evidence. Similar operations were underway in Kansas City and Philadelphia. Divers were searching Morrison Quarry for Sandra Mills' submerged vehicle, while authorities in New Jersey had identified the landfill where Michael Torres was allegedly buried. Martinez received updates throughout the day as each search produced evidence corroborating Brennan's confessions. The scale of his criminal organization was becoming clear as investigators documented murders spanning nearly a decade. Dr. Patricia Huang, the Cook County medical examiner, met with Martinez to discuss the Thompson case specifically. Detective, I've reviewed Brennan's confession about the disposal of the Thompson family remains. The industrial incinerator at Midwest Industrial Waste would have completely destroyed any physical evidence. Is there any possibility of recovering remains from the closed facility? Highly unlikely after 15 years. Industrial cremation leaves minimal residue, and the facility has been abandoned since 1997. Weather and time would have eliminated any traces. Martinez felt disappointed, but not surprised. The Thompson family would never receive proper burial, but their killer had finally been brought to justice. She turned her attention to locating Pete Kowalski, the waste facility manager who had helped dispose of the bodies. Records showed that Kowalski had died in 2003, taking his direct knowledge of the crime to his grave. However, Martinez found Kowalski's widow, Margaret, living in Hammond, Indiana. The elderly woman agreed to meet with investigators at her home. Mrs. Kowalski, we're investigating activities at the Midwest Industrial Waste Facility, where your husband worked during the 1990s. Margaret Kowalski, 81 years old, had clear memories of her husband's work at the facility. Pete came home very upset in April 1993, said he'd been forced to do something terrible for money. Did he describe what happened? He told me some men from Chicago brought bodies to the facility and paid him to incinerate them without creating records. Pete was horrified, but needed the money to pay for our son's medical treatments. Mrs. Kowalski provided crucial corroboration of Brennan's confession. Pete said there were 3 bodies, a man, a woman, and a small child. He cried for weeks after disposing of them. Did your husband keep any records or evidence? Pete was terrified of the men who hired him. He destroyed everything connected to the incident and never spoke about it again. Martinez thanked Mrs. Kowalski for her cooperation. The elderly woman's testimony provided additional confirmation of how the Thompson family's remains had been disposed of. Saturday brought more developments from the ongoing investigations. Brennan's files from the Wisconsin cabin contained extensive documentation of criminal activities, including contracts for murders, financial records of payments to killers, and correspondence with organized crime figures throughout the Midwest. Detective O'Brien worked with federal analysts to decode Brennan's record-keeping system. He kept meticulous files on every job, O'Brien reported, names, dates, payment amounts, and disposal methods for dozens of murders. The documents revealed that Brennan's organization had evolved from a simple construction fraud scheme into a sophisticated murder-for-hire operation serving organized crime families across multiple states. Martinez reviewed the evidence with Assistant State's Attorney Jennifer Walsh, who would prosecute the Thompson case. Detective, Brennan's confession and the corroborating evidence provide an overwhelming case for multiple murder charges. However, the lack of physical remains from the Thompson family limits some aspects of the prosecution. Will that affect the charges? Not significantly. We have Brennan's detailed confession, Frank Moratini's testimony, and extensive documentation of the conspiracy. The case is solid even without recovering the bodies. Walsh explained the plea agreement negotiations. Brennan will plead guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder in the Thompson case, plus additional charges related to other victims. He'll receive life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Martinez was satisfied with the outcome. Harold Brennan would never be free again, and his cooperation was helping solve cold cases that had plagued investigators for years. Sunday afternoon brought a call from Robert Thompson's brother, Michael, who had maintained contact with Martinez throughout the investigation. Detective, I can't express how grateful our family is for your work on this case. After 15 years, we finally know what happened to Robert, Linda, and Emma. Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry we couldn't recover their remains for proper burial. The truth is more important than physical evidence. Our family can finally have closure and begin healing from this tragedy. Michael Thompson asked about memorial services for the victims. We're planning a service at St. Catherine's Church next month. Father Donovan has agreed to conduct a memorial mass. Martinez promised to attend the service along with other investigators who had worked on the case. The Thompson family deserved recognition and remembrance after their long ordeal. The investigation continued as authorities in multiple states worked to identify and locate additional victims from Brennan's files. The former construction company owner had operated one of the most prolific murder organizations in Midwest history. By Sunday evening, Martinez had compiled a comprehensive report on the Thompson case for submission to federal authorities. Harold Brennan's confession had solved not only the family's disappearance, but had also provided crucial evidence for dozens of other cold cases. The 15-year mystery was finally resolved. Harold Brennan would face justice for his crimes, and the families of his many victims could begin the process of healing and closure. Detective Martinez reflected on the complexity of the case and the perseverance required to bring it to resolution. The discovery of evidence at St. Catherine's Church had triggered an investigation that exposed one of the most extensive criminal enterprises in Chicago's history. Justice had been delayed but not denied. The Thompson family's memory would be honored, and their killer would spend the rest of his life paying for his crimes. The formal sentencing of Harold Brennan took place on a cold Monday morning in December 2008. Judge Patricia Morrison presided over the proceedings in the Cook County Criminal Court, where victims' families had gathered to witness the conclusion of one of Chicago's most complex murder cases. Detective Martinez sat in the gallery alongside Detective O'Brien and Father Donovan. The investigation that had begun with a chance discovery in a church basement had ultimately exposed a criminal organization responsible for murders across multiple states. Harold Brennan, now 71 and visibly frail, stood before the judge as prosecutor Jennifer Walsh read the charges. 3 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of Robert, Linda, and Emma Thompson, plus conspiracy charges related to additional murders in Detroit, Kansas City, and Philadelphia. Mr. Brennan, Judge Morrison began, your crimes represent a level of calculated violence that shocks the conscience. You orchestrated the murder of an entire family, including a 3-year-old child, to protect your criminal enterprise. Brennan's attorney, Thomas Mitchell, had negotiated a plea agreement that avoided the death penalty in exchange for cooperation with ongoing investigations. The former construction company owner had provided testimony that helped solve 14 cold cases across the Midwest. The court accepts the defendant's guilty plea and sentences Harold Brennan to life imprisonment without possibility of parole for each count of murder, sentences to run consecutively. Judge Morrison continued, addressing the victims' families directly. While we cannot return your loved ones, we can ensure that the man responsible for their deaths will never again threaten innocent people. Michael Thompson, Robert's brother, read a victim impact statement on behalf of the family. Harold Brennan stole 15 years from our family. 15 years of wondering, hoping, and grieving without closure. His confession finally gave us the truth we needed to begin healing. Thompson described the impact of the murders on extended family members, friends, and the community. Robert, Linda, and Emma were innocent people who deserved to live full lives. Their deaths left holes in our hearts that will never be completely filled. The sentencing hearing concluded with Brennan being led away in shackles. At 71 years old with terminal lung cancer, he would likely die in federal prison within 2 years. After the hearing, Martinez met with the Thompson family members who had traveled to Chicago for the sentencing. Detective Martinez, Michael Thompson said, your dedication to solving this case gave our family something we thought we'd never have. The truth about what happened to Robert, Linda, and Emma. The case couldn't have been solved without Father Donovan's discovery and the cooperation of many people who preserved evidence and testimony over 15 years. The Thompson family had established a memorial fund in honor of the victims, providing scholarships for children at St. Catherine's School. The fund would ensure that Robert, Linda, and Emma Thompson's memory continued to benefit the community they had loved. Father Donovan organized a memorial service at St. Catherine's Church the following Sunday. The service honored not only the Thompson family, but all victims of Harold Brennan's criminal organization. Representatives from law enforcement agencies in Detroit, Kansas City, and Philadelphia attended the service, along with family members of other murder victims whose cases had been solved through Brennan's confessions. Today we remember Robert, Linda, and Emma Thompson, Father Donovan said during his homily. Their deaths were a tragedy, but their memory has helped bring justice to many other families who suffered similar losses. Martinez spoke briefly about the investigation and the importance of never giving up hope for justice, even in cold cases that seem impossible to solve. The Thompson family waited 15 years for answers. Their patience and faith in the justice system ultimately led to the resolution of not only their case but dozens of others. Following the memorial service, Martinez received updates on the ongoing investigations triggered by Brennan's confessions. Authorities in 4 states had recovered remains of murder victims and were prosecuting surviving members of the criminal organization. Frank Moratini, Brennan's partner in the Thompson murders, was scheduled to be sentenced in federal court in Detroit. His cooperation had earned him a reduction from life imprisonment to 25 years, making him eligible for parole in 2028. The extensive investigation had also exposed corruption within several municipal governments where Brennan's construction company had operated. 3 former city council members in Chicago were facing federal charges for accepting bribes in exchange for construction contracts. By Christmas 2008, law enforcement agencies across the Midwest had closed 37 cold cases based on evidence and testimony provided by Harold Brennan's organization. Families who had waited decades for answers about missing relatives finally received closure. Detective Martinez was recognized by the Chicago Police Department for her work on the Thompson case. She received a commendation for excellence in investigative work and was promoted to sergeant in the cold case division. The Thompson investigation demonstrates the importance of never closing the book on unsolved murders, Police Superintendent David Hilliard said during the award ceremony. Detective Martinez's persistence and dedication exemplify the best traditions of the Chicago Police Department. Martinez continued working cold cases, applying lessons learned from the Thompson investigation to other unsolved murders. The case had taught her that evidence could survive for decades and that witnesses often came forward years after crimes were committed. In January 2009, she received a letter from Emma Thompson's former teacher at St. Catherine's School, now retired but still living in Chicago. "Dear Detective Martinez, I wanted to thank you for solving Emma's case. She was such a bright, cheerful child. Knowing that her killer has been brought to justice helps heal wounds that have troubled me for 15 years. Similar letters arrived from community members, former neighbors, and family friends who remembered the Thompson family. The resolution of their murders had brought closure to an entire community that had been traumatized by the mysterious disappearance. Harold Brennan died in federal prison in March 2010, 16 months after his sentencing. His death ended one chapter of the story, but the investigation he had triggered continued to provide answers for families of murder victims across the Midwest. The Thompson family case became a model for cold case investigations, demonstrating how physical evidence, witness testimony, and persistent detective work could combine to solve even the most complex mysteries. Detective Martinez kept a photograph of Robert, Linda, and Emma Thompson on her desk as a reminder of the importance of never giving up on victims and their families. The case that had begun with a priest's discovery in a church basement had ultimately brought justice to dozens of families and exposed one of the most extensive criminal organizations in Chicago's history. The Thompson family's memory lived on through the Scholarship Fund, the memorial at St. Catherine's Church, and the commitment of law enforcement officers to seek justice for all victims of violent crime. 15 years after their disappearance, Robert, Linda, and Emma Thompson had finally received the justice they deserved.